Okay, so the Kumu is the piece of software that I looked for 21 years, unbelievably, because I had a 21-year love-hate relationship with a piece of software called the brain, which I was repeatedly disturbed with because it wasn't what I wanted it to be, but it's absolutely phenomenal for what they designed it to be. So a friend of mine, Fabian from Argentina, sent me an email one day, and he said, because he knew that I've been looking every time I could find a new web-based version of something to do diagrams with, I went and evaluated it. And he said, you got to go take a look at Kumu. So I went there and tried to create a username and password and found out I had one already. And because I looked at it 6 or 8 months earlier and said, nah, it ain't there. Well, it got there. And after I worked with the developers for 2 to 2.5 years, and they gave me 90% of what I asked for, I'm absolutely delighted with the environment. And today I'll show you part of why. And then in the next session, when I talk about storytelling, you'll even see more of why. So if you don't have if you're not a Kumu user already, go to kumu.io, real easy to remember, not too many letters, and sign up. Kumu is an environment where you can create all of the free, all the public models that you want for free. There's only a minute reduced capability in the free version of it, and it's unbelievable. Though what has happened is, once upon a time, Kumu was a relatively simple environment to use. Though, as users continue to ask for more and more things, the developers trying to be responsive go ahead and develop them. And it gets to the point where it has an amazing number of features, functions, and options, to a point where if one goes to Kumu to create a relationship model for some kind of relationship, it's very easy to get distracted by all of the options. You could spend days playing with the options and forget that you really wanted to create a model to begin with. It's like forgetting that you were there to drain the swamp when you're up to your ass in alligators. So what I want to talk to today is actually operational or functional, using Kumu to develop causal relationship models. And after I talk about it for 20 minutes or so, then we'll do Q&A and talk about all the administrivia associated with it. Now, it took me probably 2 years to finally decide. I'm basically lazy, okay? And I got tired of doing the same things over and over and over and over again. So I created a template. So if I want to create a causal relationship model, I come here and I fork, that's the programmer term for clone, this particular project to create a new one, because everything that I typically do on an ongoing basis is already defined, and you'll see some of that in a minute. So rather than create a new blank project, and that's what they call them in Kumu, is a project, you can start with this template. And after you use the template for a while, you can figure out which aspects of it you don't like, and you can customize it to be the kind of template that you use on an ongoing basis. So all you have to do is come over here. Oh, it helps if you log in first. Come over here and go down to Fork Project. Simply tell it that you want to fork the project. And not only can you go ahead and fork or clone this particular template, any public model in Kumu you can recycle. You can fork a copy of it so that it belongs to you, so you can do anything that you want to with it. It's really nice in that respect, so that you can go ahead and find something to use as a basis for evolving into something else, as opposed to having to go ahead and create it from scratch. Now, in this template, there's a pointer here to a project that I'm developing that maybe I'll cover and maybe I won't. But there is a video here that plays in a lightbox that will explain all the bits and pieces of this particular template. So it's easy to get started. There's also a link for downloading, and I'll talk about some of these other things afterwards. There are three types of entities that you use to create any model in Kumu. They're called element, connector, and loop. And here on this, there's a couple of loops, but you can click an individual element and you can hit the delete key, or you can come down here and hit the trash and you can delete it, or you can hold the shift key and select a bunch of stuff and you can delete all of it. When you delete it, it goes in the trash, which means it's like putting it in the trash on your desktop or whatever, so that you go over here to trash, it's all there, so that you can see all this stuff that's in the trash, and you can destroy all of it, or if you accidentally put something in the trash, if you simply begin to type the name of it, like, all right, it says bathtub stock. That was the thing that was in the trash. And it'll pull it back out of the trash and put it on your screen. So it's not really gone. So let me get rid of that and empty the trash so I can begin anew, because I don't want to run into any of the stuff that I've already developed. All right. In the environment that you're working in, this is the map, and this is called the profile page for the map. And it's something that you can edit, and all the editing is done in what's called Markdown, a text formatting language, and there's a definition of Markdown that's here, and it's only about 2 pages long. So it's very, very simple in terms of how you define what you can use to format the text. The first element that you create on your map, you have to come down here and say, I want to add an element, and I'll call it cat, and hit enter. So I now have cat on the screen. From there on, any other element that you want to add that's related to this in some manner, you can just hold the Alt key and drag off like this and create a label for it and call it mouse. Now notice, it's easier if you learn how to spell. When you create an element, every element has its own profile page on the left. So there's the profile page for moose, for whatever, but I can come over here and I can respell it. And mouse. So everything has an image that you can attach to it, a label, a type, which I'll talk about in a bit, a description field where you can describe that particular element, and that's all done in Markdown, or you can upload an image, and Kumu manages the image. They're not just links. You can add tags, and this is the same image that's up here. There's a profile page for elements, there's a profile page for connections, and there's a profile page for loops, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, notice that this connection is labeled cat to mouse. If I go ahead and put a label on it, notice it shows the label and it changes the definition of the title. And this is cat chases mouse. This is the simplest relationship model I can conceive of. And if there's anybody on this call that now feels faint, you should leave, because it gets a little more complex from here. The idea is that there are elements, and you define relationship models by defining the relationships between them. Now, if we get to begin to talk about something that's a little bit more complex than this, suppose we talk about a savings account. If you put 2 spaces in a label, it shows up as a hard carriage return when it displays the content. So for a savings account, one thing that influences this are deposits, but the label really should go, the connection should go in the other direction. So you can come down here and you can make them undirected, directed, or mutual. So I'll just reverse this. Well, I'll try it again. Okay, so deposits influence savings accounts, but they influence them in such a way that as you add deposits, the savings account increases. So I have a whole bunch of, well, there is, in the causal relationship modeling environment, there are several conventions that have been used over time. If you read Sengi's The Fifth Discipline, he uses a notation of S's and O's for same and other, which I absolutely suggest that you stay away from, because it guarantees that in some loops, one of the relationships will be absolutely wrong. The older notation from the system dynamics community is pluses and minuses, which messes up the diagram and makes it look cluttered and is confusing. So what I've done is, because of the nature of the features in Kumu, I can go ahead and select this and define that it is adds to same, and it's predefined to make that blue. So you'll find that I'll use blue ones and I'll use dash red ones for the other ones. So as deposits increase, the savings account increases. And then I ask myself, what else influences a savings account? Well, interest, oh, sorry, hold down the Alt key and say interest. All right, so interest also goes in the other direction, and it adds to. Okay. Yet, where does the interest come from? Well, the interest is a function of, I got one laying on top of the other, so let me go the other way. It's a function of the amount of money in the savings account and the interest rate. INTER. And this one has to go in the other direction. So I can change it to no. Adds to same. So if the interest rate increases, the interest increases. If the savings account increases, the interest increases. So the template is built in with these things predefined, and there's a legend down here that explains what's what. Now, there are two kinds of things in the world. There are those things which accumulate and those things which don't. Savings account is something that accumulates, or at least if you have one, you would like it to accumulate. If it didn't accumulate, why would you put your money in there? And then there are things that don't accumulate, in terms of deposits don't accumulate and interest doesn't accumulate. Interest is something that is created periodically as a result of the amount of money in the savings account, whatever the interest rate is. And as soon as it's created, it gets added to the savings account. So I might select this and I might say adds to, just for clarification. When the interest rate gets added to the savings account, the interest goes away. When the deposit gets added to the savings account, it goes away. When the savings account interacts with the interest rate, the savings account doesn't go away. This particular relationship is an informational relationship as opposed to an information of something that actually moves, and it only happens periodically or over time. So there's a feature in here so that you can say there's a delay in this relationship. What we've defined is what's typically referred to as a reinforcing structure, so that it's an activity which creates a result which promotes more of the same result. So more money in the savings account creates more interest, which creates more savings, which creates more interest. And it's a reinforcing structure. And what we have is a loop. And loops are defined by saying loops are any two or more relationships that you want to connect together for some reason. Though they don't actually have to be a loop. Based upon the way it's defined in Kumu, you simply say these are the two connections and those things that they're connected to that are part of the loop. So I now have a reinforcing loop. And the nice thing about it is that if I come here and click on this, it will show me just that loop as opposed to the things that are connected to it. And what it does is it brings it into focus, and then over here you can clear the focus. This is the zoom in, a zoom out, this is a zoom to fit, and you can do the same thing with your mouse wheel. So this defines what's called a reinforcing structure, and it gives you the basic elements of a structure. It gives you, because this is something that accumulates, I defined a thing called a stock as opposed to a variable, and I made a color difference so that when I look at the relationship model, I can readily tell that it's accumulating or declining over time. The other half of the environment is if I decide that I have an empty bathtub, and I really want to take a bath, then I need a full bathtub, and the difference between them is actually just a gap. So as I increase the tub, it causes the gap to get larger. So I'll make this a adds to, same. And if the tub begins to fill and get fuller, it makes the gap smaller. So this is actually one of the subtracts from or opposite. That gap influences me to change the faucet position, and that causes the water to flow, which adds to the level in the bathtub. And this is also adds to. So what I have is what's typically referred to as a goal or balancing structure, because it is the intent of the structure is to bring into balance the difference between two entities. And I can go ahead and say that this is a loop, and I can call it balancing B1, and I actually want all of these pieces to be part of the balancing loop. So I now have balancing loop. And that's it. That's essentially all there is. No matter how complex or complicated of a causal relationship map that you create, it's some number combination of reinforcing and balancing structures. And in future sessions, when I talk about archetypes, you'll see how these two, I mean, it's like two parts that are of an atom. I know atoms have three parts, but this is only two parts. But everything else that gets created is just some number I mean, it might be two reinforcing structures, or reinforcing in a balancing loop, or two balancing loops, or two balancing loops in a reinforcing structure. One develops an awareness or an understanding of how these two structures operate, and everything else is just some combination of them. But this should give you a sense of how you can go about creating relationship structures in Kumu in a very short period of time. And if you use the template, you don't have to worry about how all this stuff got put together. You go there, you create relationship models, and when you say, well, I hate this, I don't like this part, I don't like this color, I don't like something, everything in here is redefinable. And the documentation in Kumu is absolutely phenomenal. Down here, there's a life buoy. If you click on it, it will take you to the shortcut. I mean, there's a whole bunch of shortcuts, help. And if you read the docs, the document file is absolutely marvelous. They have continued to work on it, and there's a frequently asked questions at the end. But they go into exquisite detail about creating your first account, creating your first project, picking a template. As I said, there are different kinds of maps that are relationship models that you can create with Kumu. They have built templates for 4 of them, and there's a short 2-minute video that when you go in to create one, and you can watch that video and it will tell you what the different parts are. I would suggest that you read their manifesto, because these people are on a mission, and look at the tour. The tour will say, here are some different types of models that people have created, and look at the gallery, which is a number of well-defined models that people have done that you can go wander around endlessly. And some of them are extremely complex. This is a presentation that you can walk through. Right? And this is very nicely done because it unfolds it piece by piece. And this is one of the parts about Kumu that I absolutely love, is not only is it very fluid in terms of developing relationship models, it has a very nice presentation dimension to it that allows you to take a real complex set of relationships and unfold them in a story so that you don't overwhelm people. I tell people, I used to inflict my models on other people because I used to send them to them because I wanted to impress them with how smart I was, and they really didn't care. And after my models made their head hurt for a while, if they sent back an answer, it was mostly like, well, that's nice. But what they really wanted to say was, why'd you send this to me? Because I never gave them a way to actually digest and understand the entire content of the relationship model. I liken it to, if you go to the play and you sit there and you see the relationships unfold between the actors from one act to another, you leave the play and you take the story with you because the pattern connects. If the playwright walked up to you and handed you the script and 5 minutes later said, what do you think? There's just no way that you can digest what's in the content of that script in that form in 5 minutes. But if you sit through the play as it unfolds, then it makes sense. Or usually, I mean, if it's well done, it makes sense. So the looking at the things in the gallery, as I said, anything that you look at in the gallery, you can fork to make a copy of it that you can interact with and play with and change and see what you can build from it. Are there any questions? Yes, Steve. We have to unmute you. Unmute your mic. Steve, unmute.
I'm trying. Okay, Jane. Is there any way to keep the model that we build, create private? Like, because I want to use some for the university, but it's proprietary information.
Okay, so I said in the Kumu environment, you can create all of the the public projects that you want for free. If you want to create a private project, then it costs $9 a month. If you're going to create a project that's actually part of some development for some organization, then you probably ought to support the people that have spent years developing this environment. The alternative, there's two kinds of accounts, personal accounts and organizational accounts, and there's some different number of features in those two environments. And the basic, I mean, the difference in the accounts from my perspective that I find unbelievably useful. This, if you look at the URL for this particular project, it says kumuio.systemswiki, Kumu Template Introduction. Kumu Template is the name of the project and Introduction is the name of the map. I have another account, so I can go to admin and I can say transfer this project, and I'll transfer it to my organizational account. Well, it usually doesn't take long.
Gene, am I unmuted?
I guess so, Alex. Did I break it?
No. So just so everyone knows who I am, I'm from Kumu Customer Support. And I've worked with Gene, I've talked with Gene on a few of these projects. It's probably because there's no room for,
no,
this project's not private, is it?
No, the problem is that I already have one named.
Ah, that would make sense. Yeah, the naming version will.
I can't have two projects of the same name. So yeah. Alex happens to be the person who provides most of the support. What is it? I got one of those too. Where am I? Rename admin. Rename project.
Alex?
Yeah.
I had difficulty not saving in the past, not saving the projects, but downloading them.
Mm-hmm. Downloading them in what sense? Like as in like a screenshot or a PDF or something like that?
Like a PDF, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is a way to download PDFs. It depends. For organization accounts, it's free and on demand. You can get a PDF of any project at any time. For personal accounts, you have to request them, and then we turn them around within 24 hours, and it's a $5 fee for each one.
Okay.
But if you see that little ... icon in the bottom right of Gene's screen right now, that is where you go to get a PDF. And a PDF you'll only really need, it's like a super high resolution file. Basically, you can scale it up or down to any resolution and it'll never get blurry or pixelated or anything. So it's good for, you know, like a science poster that you're going to print out a really large size, or if you're putting the PDF up on a really big screen, it's good for that. But if you're just doing like, you know, an inter-office PowerPoint presentation or something, you just need to send a quick shot to somebody else so they can look at it. There's a screenshot tool that you can use as well. And that will not give you a super high resolution, but it's definitely high enough so that somebody can look at it and give you some feedback or something.
Is there a charge for that?
No, the screenshots you can make, those are free for all accounts. Those are free at any time. It's basically the same as using the built-in screenshot tool on your computer, but we have a little one built into Kumu as well, because just to give you that easy interface that you can just click on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll have to go back and find out why it is that I can't move this project over to my other account, but this is the original template that's in my other account. And the aspect of Kumu that to me is worth $10 a month is if you're going to develop a project and you want other people to look at it and comment on it, you can go, any person with a Kumu account can come to a public Kumu project that's in an organizational account. They can click on it. They can go down here and say comment, and it will instantly create a discussion thread. Why is this? is this blue. All right, and it will go ahead and, how do I close it?
Do you click at the bottom, there's the chat icon?
Oh, that one.
Yeah, there it is.
So what it does is it put an asterisk on that entity, so you can create a comment or a discussion thread on an element, a connection, or a loop. So if you want other people to look at things, you want to begin an exchange to actually, I mean, you're working on something and you want to continue to evolve it, to get comments from other people, it's amazing, because you could have 25 different discussions going on here about different elements, because there are parts that people have questions for. The other aspect of this template that I wanted was, notice that the default is that elements have the label inside of the element itself. But this is an image, and it puts the label at the bottom of it. And in the links inside this template, there's a link to circle images. A good friend of mine named James Brian Cameron in Scotland created me about 800 of these 200 by 200 JPEGs that cover just about anything I've ever wanted to do in terms of creating circles. And you can download a file from here, a zip file with all of those images in it. And there's, where is it? Oh, they don't, oh, okay. So that there's just about 800 of these, which are just very useful. And you just go ahead and import them into an element, and it changes it to look like a picture. So I've got a lot of relationship maps that I've done, and the pictures really assist in someone not being so put off by the image. It helps with the understanding of it. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, Gene.
Who's this? Zach?
Yeah, 3 questions.
Okay.
Is there an API for Kumu?
I don't know.
A publicly available API?
No, not at the moment, but I'm curious to know what kind of things you'd like to do. Are you thinking just adding new elements and connections using an API?
It would probably take me knowing what I want to do with it, but that's a good lead-in question for me. Mm-hmm. Second thing, is there the ability to share Kumu via Slack or via Zoom, and to be able to do that with multiple users at the same time?
So you can copy that link that you see in Gene's URL bar right now, and if it's a public project, you can just send that to anyone. They'll be able to open it up and view it. Yeah. You can also explicitly invite other Kumu users. Yeah, Gene will show you here in this members section. You can add other Kumu users there, and that would give them edit access. Mm-hmm. The only caveat is that we're thinking we'll implement this in the future, but at the moment we don't have any real-time editing. So if you and somebody else are editing the map at the same time,
yeah, that's probably fine for me.
Yeah.
What would be more interesting to me is the ability to, for instance, with a Slack channel, which can be a private channel. I'd like to be able to, the minute I connect Kumu and that channel, to have the ability, and this is kind of where the API came in, the ability for Kumu to say, oh, there are 5 people, A, B, C, D, E, mm-hmm. in there, make them able to all see this particular map.
Got it, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting use case, yeah, giving people kind of like mass granting mass access to via Slack channel. I'm going to make a note of that because,
in particular, in a private map.
yeah, and in a private Slack workspace.
So I would like to add that what I've talked about in 20 minutes is information about creating relationship maps. Though it's like riding a bicycle. You can learn something about riding a bicycle by reading a book or watching somebody ride a bicycle. You can only learn to develop relationship maps by developing relationship maps. And Nike has it absolutely right. Just do it. Don't worry about making mistakes. It's not trial and error, it's trial and learning. If you don't do it, that's your first mistake. The only way that you get better at it is do it. And you start this simple. I would suggest if you're just beginning and you want to develop relationship models, causal relationship models, watch this video, go through the exact same steps that I did, develop a reinforcing structure for a savings account, develop a balancing structure for a bathtub, and go from there. And there are just, oh, let me see, let me find. Crop damage. There are endless arrays of models in existence that you can look at and duplicate. Just go through the motions of creating it. And there's a video that I have someplace that explains how to go about creating a relationship model by starting with what is it that you want to understand, and then ask yourself, what influences this? And what influences that? And what does this influence? And you do them one step at a time. You don't do it all at once. It's like, I mean, you can't eat the elephant all at once. You have to take it one bite at a time and chew well, okay? Which is why I suggest that if you look at this, where is it? Cropped image. Something else that I defined as part of this template is what a feature called Popovers, so that when I define these things, if you select this, notice this is the description that I wrote about this loop. Yet the model is defined in such a way that when you mouse over the pieces, the descriptions that are there show up. Okay? So it's easy for other people to get a better sense of what the pieces are by simply mousing over them, as opposed to having to click and go read on the left, and it gets annoying. You get dizzy going back and forth. So that's another aspect that I was happy with about the template. And in terms of all of this, all of the shiny stuff here is all done with decorations, so that you define the width and the color and the style and everything else about the pieces, and you can do them simply using decorations, and they have built-in wizards to help you do that. Though after you do that for a day or two and get bored doing wizards, it's all in a, what do you call it, Alex? So descriptive language to describe the way it's done, so that this is the piece that allows the labels to be below the images, and this is the part that does the popover, and this is the part that causes the stocks to be yellow and the arrows to go in different directions and be different color. And if you find somebody else's model and you really like the way that they decorated it, you can copy this and paste it into your own model. Everything is visible and recyclable, which is an absolute beauty of the environment, because it's the opportunity to learn from all of the people that spent time learning before you, as opposed to having to figure it out all yourself.
How do you do the popover?
Well, in terms of the way it's developed, defined in the script, this one simple statement says that I want a popover of the description. And when you create this element, this is the description that I did of the element. So that when, in other words, I came over here and I edited this and I typed this all in, that by the definition of the script, when I mouse over this, that's what pops up. Whatever you put in as the description for that element. And while it's not essential to describe every single element, my own perspective is any loop that exists without a direction represents an incomplete model. And you label these things. You notice if you look at this, it's B1, R2, R3, R4, and this unfolds as a story. Is the presentation here? Where is it? References, and it's all connected. This is a different, this is an abstracted version of this. Sorry. I get lost in my own models sometimes. So that this is the original version of it. And if you look at the presentation, that model is unfolded by crop damage, pest-eating insects, pesticides, births for reinforcing immunity, another reinforcing structure, controlling insects, which influences crop-eating pests, and it's a vicious reinforcing structure. And there's the entire, so that in one of the future sessions, I'll talk about how to go from this model to this presentation in about 2 minutes.
Gene?
Yes, Seymour.
Is there an intention for Kumu to move to the next step and assigning data values, and we can begin to see effectively do a simulation?
As far as I know, there's no
and all that good stuff, but
as far as I know, there's no intent to actually do simulations. There is the ability, while this, in other words, I said every entity that you create has a title, a type, a description, a tag, and an image. There is an ability to add new field. If you look at...
Gene, I think we might have lost your screen somehow.
I'm not there?
I don't know if anyone else has seen what I'm seeing.
You're there.
I'm too out. Lost the screen.
Yeah, maybe just turn off the screen share and turn it back on. It's probably a Zoom bug of some sort. But yeah, in terms of simulations, it does come up every once in a while. We are still thinking about it. It's been something that we've been thinking about for a long time. But for the time being, Insight Maker is usually what we point people to, and I know Gene's been heavily involved in that one as well. Insight Maker does have the ability to do kind of those more like animated simulations. But yeah, I think Gene was going to show just now that there are ways to kind of add data values to things in Kumu and use those in decorations. This is not a causal relationship model, but it is a set of relationships between individuals engaged in it's a community development network, and it has several different types of entities on it. And if you select an entity, you look and say that this is a person, and all of these additional data values have been defined for a person because that's what they wanted to keep track of. Whereas if you look at an organization, there are only a couple of data items that are relevant to the organization. So that allows you to
define it in such a way that you don't have to look at, you only have to look at the data items that are relevant to the type. Notice that here in the type field it says organization, whereas in this field it says interested, and in this field it says, oh, that's interested also. In this field it says issue, so that there are different types of elements in this model, and that's why they're different colors, and different entities have different data items associated with them.
Gene, I just wanted to say I thank you for just even the metaphor or the analogy of the play. I know you're always saying it's about stories, but the idea of using just those templates to have some common understanding of feedback loops then creates a way to share stories and actually see how the metaphors connect to one another. There's a guy named George Lakoff that wrote a lot about this in consciousness. And yeah, no, this is exciting for me. Just there's that new theory out there about percolation theory and actually how networks work in consciousness and in games. Looking at when you connect those nodes together, what ones have the most center of gravity to have the most control on situations, and then when you connect another dot, well, that changes the whole dynamics of the story. So, I mean, it's embedded in here, just those analogies and metaphors.
Yeah. So the part about Kumu that, I mean, it's almost, the environment itself is almost as fluid as a pencil and paper, and it erases much better. And then the ability to take what you develop and put it together in such a way that you can unfold it for someone, all right? So that when you unfold it, the popovers actually work in the presentation, so a person can pop over the pieces or mouse over the pieces and actually see the definitions. But what I do with these is I create the model and revise it some dozens of times. Don't ever think that you can sit down and develop one of these and get it right, because I've probably done this one 20 times. And every time I do it, there's a nuance to it. I mean, it's sort of a dance between you and the model, and you tell it what you think, and you look at it, and it tells you that your reality is screwed up. And you work on it some more, trying to come to some level of understanding that is presented in a way that makes sense. And then you figure out how to unfold it as a story so that you can convey it to someone else. And I use these to do video voiceovers. As I unfold it, I describe the pieces so someone can watch the video and not have to read the pieces, because I explain the way that the story goes. So there's for this here, there's a video. So it's, you know, it's part of the model, and that way I can send the video to someone and ask them where it is. I mean, for one of my heroes is Columbo. Okay, if those of you can remember back to Columbo, in terms of he's always got one more question, but it's one more question to try and get somebody to help him understand something that he's confused about. So when I offer models to other people, the question is now, is there some aspect of this that I'm not understanding as well as I should? Can you offer a perspective to help me enhance my understanding and this relationship model? And that's the reason for sharing it with someone else, so that they can help me better understand. And when they do, the worst thing I can possibly do is argue with them. Because, I mean, but that's, you know, we have a tendency to become wedded to our models. And all models are ugly except mine.
Gene, there's a there's an interesting question there in the chat.
Yeah.
Bernadette says, for unfolding, would you start with the goal and then go back to the steps leading it? Or what's your preference there? I guess, maybe it depends on the map. I guess some maps don't really have a goal. Maybe they have like a final effect or a dynamic that's produced, or do you start from the end and go back, or start from the beginning, or does it depend?
Well, it depends on several things. In other words, it depends on the audience, which way you think that it conveys best to them. You go to the movies, and some movies start at the end, and then they explain to you how they got to the end. And some movies start at the beginning and take you to the end. And then there are those movies that start at the beginning and take you in both directions at the same time, like Pulp Fiction, I guess. So it's sort of, in what manner do I think that it will communicate best to the target audience? I have some sessions coming up on storytelling. I probably inflicted this on all of you several times already, but there's several events coming up in the future on storytelling, doing Insight Maker relationship models and simulation with Insight Maker, storytelling with Kumu. Insight Maker storytelling takes 2 parts, and I'm going to do a couple on archetypes, and who knows what follows after that. And the comment about if you are a Kumu user and you have not yet signed up to become a member of Kumu, the Kumu Slack community, I highly recommend it. There are currently 3,000 members of this community, and you'll notice that Alex shows up in here a lot, and that's probably because he's doing all this support for Kumu. This is a great place to get help in real short order. Something you have a question with about the Kumu environment. I also started a Slack group, which you will get an invitation. If you want to participate, I'll give you an invite to specifically continue talking about the content of this presentation. And there'll be a channel for each one of the presentations that comes up in the future. Just the idea is, I'd rather that this not be an event. I'd rather it be a foundation for moving forward. I mean, I can't attempt, or I shouldn't attempt to overload you in 20 minutes with 40 years worth of trial and learning. It's sort of, you have to work into it. So that the word of encouragement that I really offer is, do it. Go sign up for Kumu, go open it, go open this template. As soon as this is over and the video gets processed, you will end up with an email in your in your inbox that has a link to this context, and the video will be attached to it, as well as the entire content of the chat thread. And so it will all be, but you won't be able to register, and we'll take it from there. So the idea is to provide a basis for moving forward. And if you want to have a one-on-one session, to get together for a half hour or so and go through some aspect of Kumu or Insight Maker or anything else, I don't know. I should tell you that I am currently retired, only working 80 hours a week. And I'm just fascinated by doing this. And so I do it all the time. I used to be a systems thinker and annoy the hell out of people because they asked me what I did. And when I started to tell them, you could see their eyes glaze over as they ask themselves, why did I ask him? How do I get him to stop? And I finally realized that I was part of the problem. The systems thinkers continually talk about why is systems thinking not more broadly adopted in the world, and mostly that's because of systems thinkers. So I sort of said enough, and I became a storyteller, and I don't talk about systems thinking anymore, or seldom, as little as possible. And I talk about developing stories about relationships and their implications. And the question is, well, doesn't that sort of relate to everything? And I say, yeah, that's the curse, because everything is fascinating when you think about, wow, how does this relate to this, and what influences that? And I just spend all my time building models, and it's fascinating. And they're all wrong. I mean, they're all a set of thoughts at some point in time that can be further educated or informed by interaction with other people, and they convey a thought, and other people can say, what were you smoking when you developed that? And so I finally got over all my ego.
There's a few more questions in the chat that I think I can speak to. Zach, your question about, is there versioning? There isn't. I wouldn't call it versioning in the traditional sense of the word, where that every single change that you make, you can go back and find that change and go back to the previous version. But we do make backups. So for personal accounts, we make automatic backups of your projects every night, and those get stored for 1 month. So if you make a huge change and then a week later you want to revert, you can go back and revert to the version from a week before. For organization accounts, we make those backups every hour, and those get retained for 6 months. So you have a lot more like fine-tuned ability to pick what you want to go back to.
The versioning question was actually, I just added something in there that.
Oh, a common story of multiple threads. Okay, so yes, so in Kumu, when you're working in a project, you can have multiple maps within the same project. And Gene's showing that now, where you have that button there to create a new map. And so the way to think about that is, in a project, you can think of a project as a big bucket that holds all of your elements, the connections that you've added. And then when you make a map, you can pick from that master list to decide what you want to include in that iteration of your story. So in that sense, you can have different versions of the same story using the same elements and connections, but you can have them ordered in different ways, or connected in different ways, or positioned in different places around the screen. And when you create your presentation, you can use any map within your entire project. So you can have, the first section of your presentation can maybe tell the first version of your story just using one single map and unfolding that. Then you can go on to section 2 of your presentation and use a different map in the same project that's using all the same data, but it's all jumbled up in a different order to tell the story in a different way. So that way you can, I think, tell different stories pretty seamlessly. And then your other question there about customer service options. We have the same customer service available for both paying and free customers. You just email support@kumu.io, or you can jump on our Slack workspace that Gene was just showing. And I am the one who handles almost all the support. So I'll meet you in both of those places and help you out. The only other thing to know is that if you have like a big project with a deadline, we also do client work as well. So we act like a consulting team in that way, where you can come to us with a project and we can help you out for an hourly rate. That I think of as like supercharged customer support. That's how I think of that one. But yeah, that's an option as well.
There must be more. As Alex talked about multiple maps, I mean, maps can get extremely complex. And the idea of having multiple maps in a project, this is one that was done early on by the Kumu people, or maybe it was done by some people in Hawaii, but it has a whole set of maps that are part of it. And this particular map, the overall systems map, if you open this up and look at it, notice that this says R19. So if you click on R19, here's a description of R19. And if you click here, it takes you to a more detailed description of R19. So that one bubble, that one element on the other map explodes into a whole definition of a loop. Okay? So that you can, I mean, if you put all of these bubbles, I mean, you put all of the elements on a single map, which I don't think exists, it would be completely overwhelming. It ends up looking like the Afghan strategy model. So to go ahead and say, here's a abstracted version of the detail to make it easier to understand. And when somebody says, well, I need to further understand this particular piece, what was it that you were thinking about in this level of detail? You can then go ahead and go back to, or you can click on it and drill down sort of on this portion, so that here's a loop, here's a little loop right here, but here's a B10 family resilience loop, and that expands into a number of pieces right here. And the nice thing about this is, as I said before, all right, you can click on it and bring that piece into focus and look at it, and then you can expand the focus and expand the focus and expand or contract. It's just marvelous. Or hold and click in the background and it will zoom back out and take the focus away. The environment is just amazing.
Gene, it's Seymour. What I like about multiple maps is being able to do scenario planning.
Okay.
Create one model, and then you say, well, what happens if this changes? And then you have model number 2, so to speak, right next to it, then model number 3, and you're engaging people in that kind of discussion to think through impact. That's really, really a valuable way of telling a story.
Yes.
Yeah, and when you do those things in Kumu, when you create a new map, in order to bring in an element that you've already created in another map, you just have to click the green plus button at the bottom, add your element, and type in the name, and it will pull in that element, and not only the element, but also any description that you've added, basically all the metadata that you see in that profile, all of that comes along with it. So you don't have to kind of like redo all of that work or worry about, making sure the description is, I changed the description here, so now I have to go to my other 10 maps and change it there too. All those changes flow through automatically. Wow. And that touches on Bernadette's question that she just asked, which I think is maybe one of the trickiest concepts to wrap your head around when you're starting with Kumu, which is what are the differences between having multiple maps and multiple views of the same map, and how do you decide which one to do? So yeah, it's definitely, I would say it's the trickiest thing to get your head around. But the way I think of it is, in Kumu, a map itself is not really even a visual. It's not the full visualization in and of itself, the map. Although, normally, colloquially, we would look at this thing that we're looking at now, we would call this a map. But in Kumu, specifically, a map is just kind of a list of elements and connections and loops that all belong together in the same place. And then also the positions that each element should be on this canvas. The view is what gives you everything else, all of the colors, all of the shapes and sizes. So to use a different map, if you need to put the same element, if you needed to move to a different position, or for a connection to have a different curvature to wrap around something that you've now added, or you need to add different elements and connections, then you want to use a separate map. If you just want to make kind of aesthetic changes, like changing the colors or anything like that, then you're going to use a different view and apply that to the map itself. Because the view and the map, in kind of the underlying data model, the way that Kumu works, they're separate. You combine them to create a visual, but they are kind of separate components in that way. I'm actually working on we have some short videos that we've been rebooting lately, a video series for video tutorials. I was just working on a script for one the other day to kind of explain that in more detail. Because I do think when the typical workflow for somebody is they get introduced to Kumu, they come in, they have a lot of fun, and then they start to ask those questions about like, what does a map really mean? What does a view really mean? How do I use these tools effectively? And that's where you kind of get in too deep and you get drowned by all the different features that we have available. So definitely working on some more material to kind of like make the learning curve a little less steep on those concepts.
In this particular model, the view is called legend, okay, which is, you know, not very creative, but, and so as he talked about, if I decide that I want to create a new map, I call it system map, I'm creating a new map in the same project, okay? So if I come up here and now say crop damage, there's the one I started with. Here's the new one. And there is a new view for this particular map, but you can make them use the same one. But if I come down here and say I want to add spell, all right, crop damage, that is the element that was on the other map, and it brings over the description and all of the data related to that particular element. But it's displaying that element in this particular map. So the data itself is sort of universal, and you decide from one map to another how you want to display it.
And Gene, show how we can apply the view that was built for the other map. We can apply it to this map to make it look the same as the other one using the view dropdown.
If I go ahead and delete this view, okay?
Yeah, it'll bring back the legend.
Now there's only one view. There aren't, see, I should have not deleted it. You could have switched from one view to the other up here on this dropdown, because you could have a half a dozen views to have the information decorated in different ways. So the view controls the decoration of it, and the map defines the structural aspects of it. And as I said, the greatest asset of Kumu is the capabilities, and the greatest drawback is its capabilities. It can be overwhelming, which is why I said I went to developing a template, which is right here on my toolbar. And any time I want to create a new model, I just open this template and clone it. And I don't have to worry about going through and doing all of these definitions, or going through and looking at the fields and defining all the connection types, or defining the element types, or defining the loop types, because everything comes with the template and it's all there when you clone it. So as I said, I'm just basically lazy. If you figure out the answer, why should you figure it out again before you run into something else you need? In other words, this template has evolved over time. As I said, this is the template, and then no, it's missing this, and I need to add this, and so the template continues to evolve, and then I got to go back and apply the template to 50 old models that I did, and it's annoying. More questions? Well, thank you very much. Right after I process the video, I will send you a link to the context, which will have the video and a link to, I put some other things in here. Here's some example models that you can look at, some that were done by someone else, and done by a different piece of software. I mean, and there's also different pieces of software that I've looked at over time for developing relationship models, just as a reference. And it's just things that I thought of as I was thinking about putting this piece together. And this was the sequence that I was going to present in, which I changed at the last minute. So it's just, okay. Any last questions?
Thank you, Gene.
Thanks,
Okay.
Gene.
See you in another session soon.
Okay, thanks, Gene.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye, all.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Alex.
So,
Alex,
Gene,
question?
Yes, Elgar.
well, I have a question.
Okay.
But my question is so fundamentally basic to all the other guys. I mean, you guys look like you've been around for forever. You all look like sages.
Just hair color.
Well, yeah, I'm working on that, right? I want to have your problem, in the sense that I actually want to be able. I want to do this type of consulting. Yeah, I kind of want to have your problem.
Which problem is that? Hair color?
No.
I've had your hair
been-
color.
I've been trying to figure out. I had the bits of your presentation that I can identify with personally is the whole thing of discovering this whole thing called systems thinking. For me, it's just a few years ago. Just 10 years, 12 years ago, and being totally fascinated by it, thinking this will change the world one day. Taking it to my bosses and saying, would you fund me to do this training thing? Because I think it would revolutionize everything we do in consulting and all that. And they pretty much just laughed at me and checked the university to see if it was a joke, right? Literally, that's literally what they did. They literally did that. So anyways, I've pursued doing other things because, still need to work. My question is, what I really like to do is to be able to do more along the lines of process change, business process change, automation, and that type of thing. But using these tools as part of the process to help people move from one thing to another, to help them understand the problems, to design their solutions, and So I actually want to do this full time. You're retired and you do this full time in a leisurely mode. I actually want to do it full time and get paid to do it. So I'm actually hearing all of your nightmares, and I'm thinking that's the nightmare I want to have too. So how do you do that?
Well, look, there isn't a 2-minute answer for that.
I know.
I will send you a couple of videos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have your email address.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's where you live.
I will send you a short 11-minute video that was probably the greatest epiphany that I've had in 40 years. Okay.
All right.
And it represents a different approach for going about doing this.
Okay.
All right. And after I send it to you, as a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and link it to the context point, so it'll be there.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
All right, that's it.
Take care, all.
All right,
Bye.
guys. Till the next video.
All right.